Hello, good evening everyone. Good evening to you, Professor Mevelin Kabutahe. My name is Orlando Rivera and I'm from La Trinidad City, Benguet Province, Cordillera Autonomous Region, Northern Philippines. Currently, I work as an OFW, Overseas Foreign Worker here in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a supply manpower employee in Saudi Aramco under the sponsorship of Serco. As Division Secretary, performing a variety of general office clerical duties, and providing secretarial support for administrative functions. As upholds strict confidentiality, interact professionally with all levels of management, staff, and business associates. Tonight, I want to talk about the important topic of human resource policies and practices. What are human resource policies? Why have HR policies? Reason number one, your people need to know the rules. The best way to make sure your people have the information they need about the employment relationship is to have written HR policies that you give them. Reason number two, you owe it to your people to maintain reasonable consistency in how you treat them when it comes to standard policy issues like paid time off. Reason number three, it is much easier to take a negative employment action if your HR policies are written, reasonable, distributed to your employees, and you consistently follow them. Human resource or HR policies are the written rules and directives of an organization. It includes direction of areas ranging from annual leave to attendance management, conflict of interest, and corrective discipline. HR policies are provided for both company use and employee references. Our HR policies cannot anticipate every situation or answer every question about hiring processes or employment selection policies and practices. As pre-qualification to assuming any position, applicants or prospective employees are required to be screened. Each organization implements as a condition of hiring or employment an applicant interview or testing program, and reserves the right to interview or test the screening at any time during the job processing or application. Selection methods or screening devices include application blanks, employment interviews, aptitude tests, and personality tests. Finally, let us talk about the important topic, designing strategies to assess the validity and usefulness of tests as selection devices. During hiring or filling of critical vacancies at all levels as legal compliance with respect to pre-employment testing, according to one of the lessons we have learned, there are two important reasons that the proper use of testing as selection tool actually reduces risk. Utilizing tests as part of the hiring process increases a company's legal exposure or somehow entails added legal risk. The question is, how do we assess the validity and usefulness of tests as selection devices? Our first assessment says that testing makes the selection process more objective or fairer for all candidates. Tests are less objective than interviews, where the personal biases of interviewers are much more likely to lead to discrimination claims. In fact, a recently published study shows that companies are over 3 times more likely to be sued because of interviews than for their use of aptitude, personality, or skill tests. Tests also help you to minimize the risk of hiring problem employees who can often pose a far greater liability risk than tests. Our second assessment regarding the validity and usefulness of tests as selection devices is that using validated tests that do not discriminate according to age, sex, and race or nationality can reduce subjective biases and inject an objective, reliable data point into the hiring process. One thing should be done, or rather one thing should be made clear outspoken. Testing when done properly will actually reduce risk rather than increase your legal exposure related to your hiring practices. The guidelines surrounding the use of tests are the same as the rules of any selection procedures. The test must measure job-related skills and abilities. Therefore, test selection is critical to legal defensibility. No matter how valid a test is, it won't be legal defensible if you are using it in an invalid way. One typical example is when hiring a personal assistant, or what we normally consider as our secretary. A secretary's daily work requirements might include performing a variety of general office clerical duties, providing secretarial support service for administrative functions. Computer skills will be necessary, including typing skills and verbal ability to communicate with all levels of management, staff, and business associates. Consequently, using an employment test that measures an applicant's computer proficiency, typing speed and accuracy, fluency and communication of concepts, and ability to read and write would lead to be testing job-related capabilities. On the other hand, using a typing test for a forklift driver who won't be required to type is not a job-related selection measure. One of the best ways we ensure proper test selection is to have a job requirements analysis that pinpoints or determines the skills and abilities that the job requires. Hence, using well-validated tests and making sure the tests you use, as well as all your selection processes, are job-related is the best way to ensure legal compliance and a sound human resources policies and practices. As part of our discussion regarding the assessment of the test validity and reliability or its usefulness, we can now conclude that whatever a test or other measuring device is used as part of the data collection process, the validity and reliability of the test is very important. Just as we do not use a math test to assess verbal skills, we would not want to use the measuring device to reach or research that was not truly measuring what we reasoning to measure. After all, we are relying on the test or the result to show support or a lack of support for a theory, and if the data collection methods are erroneous, the data we analyze will also be erroneous. Validity of the test refers to the degree in which our test or other measuring device is truly measuring what we intended to measure. For example, the test selection or question 1 plus 1 equals 2 is certainly a valid basic addition question because it is measuring an applicant's ability to perform basic addition. It becomes less valid as a measurement of advanced addition because as it addresses some of all knowledge required for an advanced understanding of addition. On a test designed to measure knowledge of Philippine history, this question completely invalid. The ability to add single digits has nothing to do with Philippine history. Test reliability. Reliability is synonymously with the consistency of a test, survey, observation, or other measuring device. A reliability coefficient is often the statistic of choice in determining the reliability of a test. This coefficient merely represents a correlation which measures the intensity and direction of a relationship between two or more variables. Tests used for screening applicants on the basis of skills, abilities, and aptitudes can be classified as either paper and pencil test or job paper sample test. Both kinds are scored and minimum scores are established to screen applicants. The cutoff score can be raised or lowered depending on the number of applicants. If selection ratios are low, the cutoff score can be raised, thereby increasing the odds of hiring well-qualified employees. Tests should be selected only after thorough and careful job analysis. For example, examination of a job description for an auto mechanic would probably show that manipulation of parts and pieces relate relative to one another and the ability to perceive geometric relationship between physical objects were required. These abilities are part of the construct called mechanical aptitude. Various parts of mechanical aptitude can be measured using either paper and pencil or job sample tests. Job sample tests which require applicants to demonstrate specific job duties can also be used to measure mechanical ability. For example, applicants for a mechanic's job could be asked to locate and fix a number of things wrong with a car or truck. Organizations can develop their own job sample tests. Closely related to job sample tests are job simulation exercises that place an applicant in simulated job situation to see how well he can or she can cope. Right after we discuss or talk about the important topic designing assessment strategies to assess the validity and usefulness of tests as selection devices during hiring or filling of critical vacancies with respect to pre-employment testing, next we then describe jobs for which interviews are effective selection devices. Now let us describe jobs for which interviews are effective selection devices. In selecting the best person for the job. Another widely used selection technique is the interview, a formal in-depth conversation conducted to evaluate an applicant's acceptability. In general, the interviewer seeks to answer three broad questions. Can the applicant do the job? Will the applicant do the job? How does the applicant compare with others who are being considered for the job? Interviews are popular because of their flexibility. They can be adapted to the following related works or jobs. Unskilled work or jobs are simple tasks and doesn't usually require one to exercise judgment. It typically requires only a month or less than to learn. Many but not all unskilled jobs require physical strength or good coordination. Here are some examples of unskilled jobs. Parking lot attendant, cleaner or janitor, fast food worker, line operator, messenger, sewing machine operator, which includes the use of auto mechanic machineries, construction laborer, information desk clerk, vegetable harvester or upper picker, and some other types of workers, or farm workers. If you have a history of only unskilled work, the person who conducts interview can say that there are semi-skilled or skilled jobs you can do. You can do only unskilled work and only if your limitations allow it. Also, unskilled jobs don't produce transferable skills. So if your ability jobs have been unskilled and you are 50 years or older, you have a chance of fitting into a grid or network rule that says you're disabled. On the other hand, if you have transferable job skills and you can do at least sit-down work, you won't be found disabled. Another one is the semi-skilled work. Semi-skilled work requires paying attention to detail or protecting against risk, but it doesn't include complex job duties. Semi-skilled work doesn't require you to have advanced training or education, and typically takes between 3 and 6 months to fully learn a semi-job or semi-skilled job. Some semi-skilled jobs require monitoring, quality checking, or doing negative task responsibilities. Here are some examples of semi-skilled jobs: retail salesperson, security guard, telephone solicitor, waiter, waitresses, bartender, flight attendant, taxi driver, laundry operator, nurse assistant, furniture mover, file clerk, and fisherman. If your past history includes any semi-skilled work, the interviewer may say there are many unskilled or semi-skilled jobs you can do, if your indication or limitations allow it. And it's less likely that you'll fit into the disabled grid rule because the interviewer is more likely to find you have some transferable skills. Lastly, the skilled work. Let us see now some examples of this type of work or job. Skilled work requires workers to use their judgment to make decisions and may require them to measure, calculate, rate, or estimate Skilled work often has specific qualifications and usually requires intellectual reasoning and problem-solving skills. It typically takes 6 months to a year or more to learn a skilled job. Here are some examples of skilled jobs: secretary or administrative assistant, sales representative, customer service representative, tailor, nurse, office clerks, teacher or teacher aide, fast food clerk, travel agent, and mortgage processor, and this also includes managerial and staff employees. It is difficult for a disability applicant with a history of skilled work to be found disabled unless the applicant can do even sedentary work, because there are many different types of skilled, semi-skilled, skilled sedentary jobs that a person or applicant with skills may be able to do. And it's much less likely for a skilled worker to fit into a grid rule, because someone with the transferable job skills won't be found disabled under the grid rules. Interviews do have some shortcomings. However, the most noticeable flaws are in their areas of reliability and validity. Good reliability means that the interpretation of the interview result does not vary from interviewer to interviewer. Reliability is improved when identical questions are asked. The validity of interviews is often questionable because few departments use standardized questions. They also allow a two-way exchange of information, where interviewers can learn about the applicant and the applicant can learn about the employer or company. Managers can boost the reliability and validity of selection interviews by planning the interviews, establishing rapport, closing the interview with a time for questions, and reviewing the interview as soon as possible after its conclusion. Now, we have just discussed about the validity and usefulness of tests and described jobs for which interviews are effective selection devices. Now, we next identify the 4 types of employee training, address career paths, and discuss career development. Then career planning and development methods are described. Let us define the general skill categories. A skill is the learned ability to carry out a task with predetermined results, often with a given amount of time, energy, or both. In other words, skill is the abilities that one possesses. Skills can often be divided into domain general and domain skills, or rather domain specific skills. For example, in the domain of work, some general skills would include time management. Time management is the act or process of planning and exercising conscious control over the amount of time spent on specific activities, especially to increase effectiveness, efficiency, or productivity. A time management system is designed combination of processes, tools, techniques, and methods. Time management is usually a necessity in any project development, as it determines the project of completion, time, and scope. The major themes arising from the literature on time management include the following: creating an environment conducive to effectiveness, setting of priorities, carrying out of activity around those priorities, the related process of reduction of time spent on non-priorities, and finally, incentives to modify behavior to ensure compliance with time-related deadlines. Now, time management is general skill category. Next to time management as general skill category is teamwork. Teamwork is work to be done by several associates with each doing a part but also subordinating personal prominence to the proficiency or efficiency of as a whole. In business, setting accounting techniques may be used to provide financial measures of the benefits of teamwork, which are useful for justifying the concept. Teamwork is increasingly advocated by healthcare policymakers as means of assuring quality and safety in delivery of services. establish interdisciplinary team training programs for providers that incorporate proven methods of team training, such as simulation and safety drill. Our third skill category is popularly known as the leadership. Leadership has been described as a process of social influence in which one person can enlist the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task. For example, some understand a leader simply as somebody whom people follow, or as somebody who guides or directs others, while others define leadership as organizing a group of lay people to achieve a common goal. Studies of leadership have produced theories involving traits, situations, interactions, function, behavior, power, vision and values, charisma, intelligence, and among others. Our last skill category is the self-motivation. Motivation is a theoretical construct used to explain behavior. It is the scientific word used to represent the reasons for our actions, our desires, our needs, etc. Motives are hypothetical constructs used to explain why people do what they do. A motive is what prompts a person to act in a certain way or at least develop its inclination for a specific behavior. For example, when someone eats food to satisfy the need of hunger, or when a student does his work in school because they want a good grade, both show in a similar connection between what we do and why we do it. According to Martin L. Mayer and Heather A. Mayer, motivation is a word that a part of the popular culture as a few other psychological concepts are. Wikipedia readers will have a motive or motives for reading an article, even if such motives are complex and difficult to pinpoint. At the other end of the range of complexity, hunger is frequently the motive for seeking out and consuming food. We just enumerated the skills that fall under the domain general, whereas another skill categories is the domain-specific skills, which will be useful only for a certain job. This skill usually requires certain environmental stimuli and situational to assess the level of skill being shown and used. People need a broad range of skills in order to contribute to a modern economy. A joint study showed that through technology, the workplace is changing and identified 16 basic skills that employees must have to be able to change with it. First is the labor skills. Skilled workers have a long had historical import as masons, carpenters, blacksmiths, bakers, brewers, coopers, printers, and other occupations that are economically productive. Skilled workers were often politically active through other crafts guilds. Life skills. Life skills are problem-solving behaviors used appropriately and responsibly in the management of personal affairs. They are a set of human skills acquired via learning, teaching, or direct experience that are used to handle problems and questions commonly encountered in daily human life. The subject varies greatly depending on societal norms and community expectations. People skills. According to the Portland Business Journal, people skills are described as understanding ourselves and moderating our resources, talking effectively and emphasizing accurately, building a relationship of trust, respect, and productive interactions. A British definition of people skill is the ability to communicate effectively with people in a friendly way, especially in business. The term is not listed yet in major US dictionaries. The term people skills is used to include both psychological skills and social skills, but is less exclusive than life skills. Social skills. Social skills is any skill facilitating or facilitating interaction and communication with others. Social rules and relations are created, communicated, and changed in verbal, and conversable ways. The process of learning such skills is called socialization. Soft skills. Soft skills is a sociological term relating to person's EQ or emotional intelligence quotients. The cluster of personality traits, social graces, communication, language, personal habits, friendliness, and optimism that characterize relationship with other people. Soft skills complement hard skills, part of a person's IQ, which are the occupational requirements of a job and many other activities. Hard skills. Hard skills are any skills to relating to a specific task or a situation. Skills are easily quantifiable, unlike soft skills, which are related to one's personality. And lastly, the mastering skills. Mastery pertains to protecting or perfecting a particular skill set. To reach mastery, authors Malcolm Gladwell and Robert Greene claim that 10,000 works or hours of work will have to be put in training. After we discuss about the categories of skills and we just mentioned about work to be put into training, now we need to identify the 4 types of employee training. Once again, we need to mention about the mastering skills. Mastery pertains to perfecting a particular skill set, and to reach mastery, authors Malcolm Gladwell and Robert Mark Greene claim that 10,000 hours of work will have to be put into training. The quality of employees and their employment or development through training and education are major factors in determining long-term profitability of a small business. If you hire and keep good employees, it is good policy to invest in development of their skills so they can increase their productivity. Often training is considered for new employees only, but this is a mistake because ongoing training for current employees helps them adjust to rapidly changing job requirements. Our task is to identify the 4 types of employee training, but before that, we need to enumerate firstly the purpose of training and development. Training needs can be assessed by analyzing 3 major human resource areas: the organization as a whole, the job characteristics, and the needs of the individuals. This analysis will provide answers to the following questions. Where is training needed? What specifically must an employee learn in order to be more productive? Who needs to be trained? There are several types of employee training programs. Employees may receive basic literacy training, interpersonal skills training, technical training, problem-solving training, and diversity or sensitivity training. Each type of training targets a different facet of an organization's overall culture and performance. Here are the types of employee training programs. Most businesses offer their employees some type of training. Managers know that the investment of employee training programs in a whole variety of areas is important to the bottom line or profitability of the business. Let us identify the types of employee training: literacy training, interpersonal skills training, technical training, problem-solving training, and in addition to the first 4 types of the training we have just mentioned is the diversity or sensitivity training. What is literacy training? Basic literacy training is training for things like reading, writing, and problem-solving skills. There are several benefits to literacy training for employees. Employees will be more likely to perform the following: meet company goals, perform job tasks, understand work processes, work in teams, make decisions, learn technology. Next to literacy training is the interpersonal skills training. Interpersonal skills training is training on how to maintain positive relationships, communicate better, resolve conflicts, and build trust. This training was offered to every member of the crew. There are several benefits to interpersonal skills training for employees. Employees will be more likely to get along with each other, exchange positive communication, minimize conflict, influence others to be positive. The third one we need to discuss about the technical or technology training is the training or technology training. Technology training is training on computer software and hardware offered to specific members or employees depending on other position. There are several benefits to offering technological offer or training to employees. Employees will be more likely to perform at higher standards, have more self-confidence, develop higher level skills, and lastly, perform many different tasks. The fourth type of employee training is the problem-solving training. Problem-solving training is a training on how to analyze problems and make decisions in a mandatory for all employees or members of the organization. Employee will learn how to identify problems, analyze problems, assess solutions, implement solutions, and monitor outcomes. There are many benefits to offering problem-solving training to employees. Employees will be more likely to offer creating solutions to problems, collaborate on problem solving, avert or prevent disasters. In addition to the first four types of employee, training is the diversity or sensitivity training. An organization is a mix of many different cultures. This sometimes causes arguments amongst employees or members. Sometimes employees or members fight because of their differences. In order to maintain creativity or civility and avoid mutiny, the employees or members must find ways to get along, and this where diversity or sensitivity training will come in. After our previous discussion, we are now able to assess the validity and usefulness of tests as selection devices and describe jobs for which interviews are effective selection devices during employee hiring process. We were able to define the general skill categories. We identified the types of employee training. Now we move on to explain the purpose of the performance evaluation and who can conduct it. We have just discussed about training as the systematic development of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes required by an individual to perform adequately a given task or jobs. Its purpose in the work situation is to develop the abilities of the individual and to satisfy current and future manpower needs of the organization. It clearly implies that the role of training is to improve the overall performance of the organization. The term performance is therefore interwoven to the next question. How should your HR policy and procedures to employee performance evaluation be communicated and who can conduct it? A performance evaluation or appraisal is the process by which a manager evaluates an employee's work performance by measurement and comparison with previously established standards. This evaluation is communicated to employee, and he then has the opportunity to contribute his assessment of his work performance. The results of the performance evaluation or appraisal and discussion are recorded in the employee's personal file. Our purpose is to provide information about work performance that is used to administrative decision making. Decisions about salary increases, bonuses, training, discipline, promotions, and other administrative actions generally are based on information throughout in a performance appraisal. An organization team cannot and should not make administrative decisions without the input provided in the performance appraisals. As with other human resources policies, performance appraisals must be constructed to comply with legal standards, preventing discriminations against any groups. The other major purpose for conducting performance evaluation is to provide employees with feedback. about their work performance based on the standards established in the job description and analysis. This feedback can be very helpful when given positively and with support for professional training. Most individuals like to receive that is constructive and that allows for more maintenance of self-esteem. Feedback also gives employees the opportunity to define the career path they will take with the organization. For example, feedback from the performance evaluation may indicate that an employee is ready to move on to increased responsibility, or feedback may indicate that further training is necessary for an employee to continue in her current position. Whatever the outcome of the feedback, employees are more in touch with where they stand within the organization. Having all policies and procedures in place not only protects the organization from legal risk, they also ensure employees feel they will be treated fairly and consistently by a transparent management team. They add to a culture of clarity, employee engagement, and trust with significantly productivity and providing return on company investment. Before we move on to our next topic, we will have to discuss a case analysis which relates to our previous lessons, which is number 8, the case analysis entitled The Big Promotion. The primary topic of this case is leadership, with a lesser emphasis on interviews. The fictional case describes Miss Devon and Miss Isabella, two candidates vying for an executive leadership position of a large software company. The two are interviewed by the company or CEO, Paul McLister, who asked about the nominees, Mr. Devon and Miss Isabella, to describe their leadership style. The first question was, how would you describe Devon's and Isabella's leadership style? Devon exudes the characteristic of transactional leader, whereas a leader able to achieve influence by rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior, which is relatively related to reinforcement theory. Leadership style or approach Mr. Devon leadership style or approach particularly initiating structure and describe his role as a leader who is also our organizer, clarifying what needs to be done, setting goals, and ensuring that his employees have the necessary resources to perform. Mr. Devon is a leader who engages in fair treatment in which rewards and punishment are distributed justly. Our next candidate, Miss Isabella. Miss Isabella implies that she is a charismatic and transformational leader. Isabella views a leader requires a certain something which supports that trait perspective of leadership. She believes that the end result of her leadership is motivated workforce that comes to see an organization being loved as their own company, a view that is consistent with transformational leadership theory. Second question is, number 2. Whose leadership style do you believe would be more effective, Isabella or Devon's, and why? What if any situational factors might effectiveness depend on? I believe that Devon's or Mr. Devon will be effective leader. He exudes characteristics of a transactional leader, whereas a leader able to achieve influence by simply rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior. Mr. Devon is a leader who engages in fair treatment in which rewards and punishment are distributed justly and not just by consideration of each employee's welfare or giving individualized consideration. If any situational factors, the transactional leaders having equally distributed rewards and punishment or having policies and procedures in place not only protects the organization from risk, it will also ensure employees feel they will be treated fairly and consistently by a transparent management leader team. Our third question is, if you were Paul, who would you hire and why? Mr. Devon will be best suited for position because of his leadership style or approach, particularly initiating structure and describe his role as a leader. He is also an organizer, clarifying what employees and company needs to be done, setting goals and ensuring that his employees have the necessary resources to perform. He knows that after his employees completed task, follow objective and orders, they will be rewarded or something which they will find to be of great value. Mr. Devon will be a leader who ensures all his employees will be treated fairly and eliminate the guessing game for both the leader and employees. What are some potential downsides to each candidate's leadership style? Potential downsides of Mr. Devon being transactional leader are: his leadership might flawed since it motivates people only on the base level. Punishment and reward does not motivate on a higher level of people throughout the development. Number 2, this is poor when higher thinking skills level is needed to utilize. Number 3, Mr. Devon's might also limit its follower that wishes to engage with higher level of professional environment. We now discuss the potential downsides of Miss Isabella as our charismatic and transformational leader. First, this saddles his leadership with a huge responsibility for both keeping the company running and motivating the staff. Number 2, employees are often able to pick up on the fact that a charismatic leader only cares about his own success or lacks of knowledge on lack of knowledge to actually run the company. Third, if he doesn't have any other management personnel on the same level with the same information, he may potentially miss a threat to the company's financial welfare. Number 4, the type of environment may also squash some of the creative problem solving from other employees in the company, particularly if any ideas presented are pushed aside by the leader. Second to the last question is, whose employees do you think are likely to be more motivated? Mr. Devon's or Miss Isabella? Whose employees are likely to have higher job satisfaction, trust in leadership, and organizational commitment, and why? Mr. Devon's employees are likely to be more motivated, since the transactional leadership style is form of management than leadership. It is very effective in motivating and encouraging subordinates and obtaining productivity. Employees under transactional leadership are likely to have higher job satisfaction, trust in leadership, and organizational commitment, and will get additional reward when they exceed form and the expectation and the leader. Or rather, when they exceeded from the expectations and the leader. Will also handle and work on those people with low performance. It's clearly understood by the employees what the company expected from them. They independently compete and accomplish the task at the hand. Here is our last question. Based on their leadership styles, in what type of organizational structure would Devon's be most effective? What about Isabella, and why? Considering Mr. Devon's leadership style, he would be most effective under the bureaucratic organization structures because his leadership is characterized by a precision, speed, ambiguity, strict subordination, reduction of friction, and of material and personal costs. These are raised to the optimum point in the strict bureaucratic administration. These structures have a certain degree of standardization. They are better suited for more complex or larger scale organizations, usually adopting a tall structure. The Weberian characteristics of bureaucracy are clear defined roles and responsibilities, a hierarchical structure, respect for merit. On the other hand, Miss Isabella's leadership style will be most effective under post-bureaucratic organization structures, where it provides detailed discussions with attempts to describe an organization that is fundamentally not bureaucratic. Charles Hitchcock or Hecker has developed an ideal type, the post-bureaucratic organization in which decisions are based on dialogue and consensus, rather than authority and command. The organization is a network rather than a hierarchy, open at the boundaries, in direct contrast to culture management. There is an emphasis on meta decision-making rules rather than decision-making rules. This sort of horizontal decision-making by consensus model is often used in housing, cooperatives, other cooperatives, and when running a non-profit or community organization. It is used in order to encourage participation and help to empower people to normally experience operation in groups. That's all for tonight. And once again, I'm Orlando M. Rivera. And please wait for my next topic. It's regarding organizational change and stress management. Once again, good evening and good night.